What is up, guys? This is QRM from the Trinity of Lift, and today I'm going to bring all of you guys my updated Chaos Dragons for this brand new November 2015 format. Now, a lot of you guys actually were, of course, requesting this specific deck profile for this new format, and I'm very happy to oblige just because of the fact that this deck is still a lot of fun for me. And with the amount of testing that I actually was putting into this deck recently, I actually am very confident and very proud, actually, of this list that I'm about to bring to you guys, of course, today. So, yeah, enough of me talking. Let's just get right into the profile so I can just show you guys why I'm just so happy with this deck as it is right now. So, of course, we're going to start off with the main deck, as per usual, with 3 copies of the Light Pulsar Dragon, because he's, of course, the best dragon in our main deck, because he can recur himself from the grave, and he's also just, of course, a free summon whenever we do drop into him. And also being a level 6 is fairly relevant because of the fact that in our extra deck we are using quite a few level 8 synchros and a couple of level 10 synchros. So just Light Pulsar being a level 6 really just allows us to get into those synchro plays a lot easier too. So of course we have the 3 Light Pulsar. Then, moving on, we have our 2 copies of the White Dragon Wyvern and our 2 copies of the Black Dragon Collapse Serpent. Of course, because these guys are floating dragons of the deck, because they help us get into our rank 4 plays really, really fast, or they can also help us get into our level 8 synchro plays as well. So, of course, we are running these guys at 2 apiece. Moving on, we have our 1 copy of Eclipse Wyvern, of course, to help us search out our Dark Arm Dragon and our Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, because again, these are 2 more really strong dragons that we can run in this deck. So, of course, because they are just the Chaos Dragons, I guess you could say, we have to run them. Moving on to one of the new changes actually that was brought about by the ban list. We have actually 3 copies of the Chaos Sorcerer. Now, this is actually really cool because of the fact that now with 3 Chaos Sorcerer, we don't have to play Dark Flare Dragon. And previously in most Chaos Dragon iterations, we would run Dark Flare Dragon to act essentially as a name that we can float into with Light Pulsar. But because of how Dark Flare Dragon was a level 5, which actually made it really awkward to use for any extra deck plays, just really made it difficult to use for any like meaningful play outside of just using it for a 2400 attack beater. So now with the 3rd Chaos Sorcerer filling in that spot, we essentially have another level 6 monster that we can use, which in my opinion is a lot better of a level. And then of course it's just a lot better because of the fact that it provides good spot removal, of course, just because banishing is always really good. And again, like I said, it is a level 6, so it helps us go into our relevant extra deck plays a lot much easier. Now, I will also say that it might hurt sometimes because of how Chaos Sorcerer is 100 attack points less than Dark Flare Dragon, as Dark Flare Dragon could actually poke over things like Cosmo Slip Rider, and Chaos Sorcerer can't without crashing into it. But again, that little minor drawback doesn't really warrant me still running Dark Flare Dragon over another copy of Chaos Sorcerer. So that is again why we are running 3 of him. Then moving on, we have, of course, our obligatory BLS, because he is another one of our big boss monsters that we can, of course, run in this deck. So again, why wouldn't we, essentially? So that'll be it for the primary Chaos monsters of our deck. Moving on, we are still running a Lightsworn engine in the form of 3 copies of Radiant, because he's just, of course, really good. He, being the level 4 tuner of our deck, can just really get us into any of our rank 4s or our level 8s again, which is kind of the overarching theme of this deck. So again, just having the versatility of Radiant, as well as how he can actually give us 4 cards into our graveyard on the very first turn, is never a bad thing. So of course we have the 3 Radiant. Then we also have 2 copies of the Lumina, primarily in here to help us give access to our rank 3s, as well as we can also use her to help us get into our specific level 7 synchros, which can be very strong because of how the level 7 synchros, specifically in this extra deck, can just generally support our whole Chaos Dragon deck in general. So of course we have the 2 Luminas in here for those plays. And then, of course, finally, we have the 1 copy of the Lila, because this deck can lose just really hard to lose 1 turn, because Chaos Dragons are naturally a very aggressive deck, and when all of our monsters are in defense mode, we can attack, obviously. So, of course, having the Lila in here to act as a searchable back row out is never a bad thing. So that will run us off of our Lightsworn engine. Moving on to some of the other cards that we are running. I'm actually running 3 copies of Performance Trick Clown, just because this card... oh my god, that's all I'm pretty much wanting to say right now. This card has so many applications in this deck that It's absolutely outstanding. Like, I cannot get over how ridiculous this card is. You essentially can pitch it off of your Light Pulsar effect from the graveyard to take away that neg 1 that Light Pulsars usually would bring about from that play, and make it a break even and get a free level 4 on board from it, which is really cool, along of course with your Light Pulsar. This card is also really, really good to mill off of things like specifically like our Raiden, because if we end up milling Trick Cloud off of our Raiden effect, we can also immediately of course summon the Trick Cloud from our grave and then make an immediate level 8 synchro, which again is really, really good. Like, I will say this: if you guys end up trying to play this deck anywhere, either be on YGO Pro or Dueling Network or any of things like that, you will be able to find so many applications for this card that it's not even funny. So of course we are running those 3 Trick Cloud to just help us get some really good monsters, essentially. Then moving on to another engine that we're also running, we're actually running the Turgide engine again, of the one copy of Turgide, the one Seer Malabranca of the Burning Abyss, and the one Curry Bandit. Now, the reason why these cards are here, and I know Turgide is limited, and that can potentially be a consistency problem, but the simple fact is that previously when we did actually have 3 Rhoda and we didn't know Rhoda was gonna get hit to 1, I was previously running Armageddon Knight in this deck, but now because of how Rhoda is again at 1, I felt the running Armageddon Knights at multiples wasn't gonna be very good because it was gonna be a lot less consistent without that 3 Rhoda. So I ended up cutting that Armageddon idea entirely, and I ended up just falling back pretty much on the Turgide engine because, of course, Turgide is a very, very strong turn 1 opener because she can get us into our Dante first turn, which is never a bad thing. And the thing is, too, I have opted to run Seer with Turgide, primarily because this allows us to actually Seer Dante loop really, really well. And because of that, our deck now can have a very good defensive play. As most of you probably will know by now, the Seer Dante loop is very, very potent, as it essentially always gave Burning Abyss that big grind game of theirs. Now that we are applying that same mentality to Chaos Dragons, it actually just lets us really be a lot more aggressive and not have to worry about losing to things like Torrential, Raigeki, or Dark Hole, because again, if we end up making the Dante with the Seer, we can basically say that we have an infinite monster loop that we can sit behind until we again make our board presence yet again. So that is why we are running the Tear Guide and the Seer. And then, of course, we're also running the one copy of the Curry Bandit because it is another monster we can summon off of Turgide, as well as just in case we might like see Seer first before Turgide, we at least know that we can have another target in our deck for Turgide to summon whenever we might see her. So yeah, that'll be it for the Turgide engine of our deck. And then moving on to the final just generic support for the Chaos Dragon deck, we have 3 copies of Plague Spreader Zombie because this card is very important for our big synchro climbing plays into our level 8 or our level 10 synchros. So of course we have to have 3 Plague Spreader Zombie in this deck in my opinion because of just how important it is to many of the combos. And then finally, of course, we have 2 copies of the Maxi because this card is still really good in my opinion in this format. As of course, in my opinion, Effect Veiler isn't as potent as it once was because a lot of the decks now cannot be targeted, i.e. Magic Specters and Cosmo. So I just felt that Maxi was probably just a lot better than Veiler now because Veiler again targets. So I felt like it wasn't as good as how good Maxi would be in this deck. So yeah, that'll round us off from our monster lineup. Moving on to our spells. We start off with the 2 copies of Charge of the Light Brigade because, again, searching out our Radiant's first turn is very important. So having the charges essentially for them is really good. And then, again, to also search out our Raiden, I guess, to follow the trend, we have 1 copy of Rhoda, because Rhoda also searches out our 3 copies of Raiden. And again, like I said, Raiden is a really, really good turn 1 play, and we really want to try and see that card on our first turn. So with the 2 Charge of the Light Brigade, the Rhoda, and the 3 actual copies of Raiden, we essentially are running 6 copies of Raiden in this deck to, again, help us have the higher probability of seeing it on our first turn. Moving on to our other spells, we have, of course, 3 copies of the Instant Fusion, because with the way this deck fuses its grave really, really fast through milling, and also because we are running quite a few level 4s on our deck, having the Instant Fusion in here to act as a 1-card rank 4 or a 1-card level 8 synchro is really never bad, because again, it just gives Chaos Dragons a higher ceiling of play, and it gives them essentially just more powerful plays to work with. So we are running the 3 Instant Fusion. Then finally, for our last one of spell cards, we are running 1 copy of Soul Charge because we will be milling a lot. We will be getting a lot of our monsters into the graveyard. So having just 1 big recursion spell card is never really a bad thing. Then, of course, we have the one copy of Galaxy Cyclone for spot back row removal, as well as because it's not dead when we mill it, so it just essentially acts as a really good card either when we draw or mill it either way. So, of course, we just have the Galaxy Cyclone for that utility. And then finally, of course, the one Raigeki, because this deck is very, very aggressive, and we really just want to beat our opponent's face in by hopefully turn 3. So having Raigeki in here to help us clear our opponent's board as fast as possible is never a bad thing. So that will round us off from our 40 card main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, which is actually where this deck really gets cool. We start off with the one copy of Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiend. Now, I will say this is probably my favorite synchro monster in the game right now. This card is absolutely absurd, just because it's essentially a dark hole on legs that also burns your opponent, as well as if to top it all off, you can still attack with it after you use its effect. So it just beats Hot Red Dragon Archfiend just out of the water. Like, that card pretty much sucks now with Scarlight being out, because this card is just insane. Like, this card just it single-handedly wins me games sometimes just with how powerful his effect is. So I definitely would recommend running this card in the extra deck, because again, you are going to be going into your level 8 synchros quite often. So of course, why not have pretty much, in my opinion, the best level 8 synchro in your extra deck, because it's also generic, I should also mention. So that's pretty darn cool. Then following that, we also are running one copy of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Bane, because we can actually synchro climb into this guy using this guy. And because of that, it's really good because we can actually use Bane's effect, as whenever he is on the field once per turn, we can tribute any monster on our side of the field to special summon any Red Dragon Archfiend monster in our graveyard. So essentially, if we use this card to synchro climb into the Bane, if we have another monster on our board, we can actually use Bane's effect, tribute that monster, and then essentially get the finishing board of the Bane and the Scarlet, which is really, really good by itself. And not to mention, with all that good effects, it's also a 3500 attack beater, which is bigger than Cosmo Dark Destroyer, notably. And it's also really cool because whenever Archfiend Bane does damage to your opponent, you can special summon 2 tuners, one from your deck and one from your graveyard that share the same level, and just special summon them to your field. So essentially, how that works into this deck is you can basically summon 2 copies of Raiden if one is in your grave and you have another copy in deck, and that just gets you another free, essentially, rank 4 play, which is crazy again. Like, I can't get over how broken these two guys are together in this deck. And again, I would very much highly recommend you guys should try it out in Chaos Dragons. So yeah, that'll be it for the Hot Red Dragon Archfiends in our deck, essentially, in our extra deck. Moving on to the generic stuff, we have the one copy of Goyo Guardian just to be a good level 6. We have the one copy of Clearwing because it can protect our entire deck almost. We have the one copy of Black Rose because Exciton is now banned, so having the Black Rose as the board nuke is never a bad thing. We have the one copy of Stardust Dragon to help us not lose automatically to the Dark Holes, Raigekis, and Torrentials. And then, of course, for the last synchro, we are running one copy of Leo, because this card is really, really good against, of course, Burning Abyss, as we all probably know. And it's also very strong against Cosmo, because it's immune to Dark Destroyer's effect, because Dark Destroyer does target. And Leo is also bigger than Cosmo Dark Destroyer by a whole 100 points. So it really can just have a very big impact in that matchup again, because Cosmos will actually have a pretty darn hard time getting over it without a card like Honest. So yeah, that will be it for our synchro monsters of our extra deck. Moving on to the XZs, we have our one copy of Dante, Traveler of the Burning Abyss, because like I said, with Turgide and Lumina, we are running this guy because he is a very, very good card by himself. Of course, acting like the card trooper he is. And again, like I said, we can use him to sear Dante loop for days. So yeah, we have the one copy of Dante. Then we also have the one copy of Levier because of the fact that we can actually use it for some pretty cool combos whenever we do banish monsters for our Chaos Summons, as primarily we will be trying to banish our Raidens and or our Luminas for our light monsters whenever we banish for our summons. So having them in banish pile actually makes Levier just really, really strong again, because we can use Levier to grab all of those monsters back. So yeah, we are running the one Levier to round off our rank 3s. Moving on to our rank 4s, we have the one copy of Castel because it's very, very good spot removal. We have the one copy of Dark Rebellion to act as a very big beater in our extra deck for our rank 4s. And then we also have the one copy of Abyss Dweller to help us shut down Cosmo big ship floating effects, because we don't like that to happen either. So yeah, we have those guys for our rank 4s. Moving on to our Solidary rank 6 monster, we have our one copy of Constellar Ptolemy M7, just because this guy can actually just let you go for game in really obscure ways, because he essentially can recycle you any monster, I believe, or any card maybe, No, yeah, it's any monster in either player's grave, but usually it's gonna be your grave. As basically this guy can recycle your BLS. That's all I have to say. It can recycle BLS, which is really dumb. So yeah, that'll be it for the Xyz monsters of our extra deck. And then of course for our fusion monsters, we have the obligatory 2 copies of Elder Entity Norden to help us support our instant fusions, of course. And then of course, you say token, gotta show that off. Never fail. So yeah, guys, that will be it for my Chaos Dragon deck profile for this brand new and updated November 2015 format. I hope you all did very much enjoy this profile. And moving forward, I will also mention right now that the coming profiles that I do actually have planned are all going to be rogue decks. Now, I will preface that I'm not going to probably be playing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Until January when we do actually get the Monarch structure deck, as currently there is no really good meta deck that I want to play, or the meta decks are just extremely expensive right now, and I don't want to touch those. So, again, because of that, there will be a lot more rogue decks on this channel moving forward. So, I very much hope that you guys will look forward to that. I will also give a little hint that a lot of them are machine decks. So, you guys can probably guess what those guys are going to be when I actually get around to profiling them again. So, yeah. Again, hope you all very much did enjoy this Chaos Dragon deck profile. And as always, this is QRim from the Trinity of Lift. And I'll see all of you guys later. Peace out.